Okay, very good. So welcome everyone. This is the presentation by the Fallbrook Climate Action Team, and we are a group of citizen volunteers concerned about climate change, bringing you various topics on the last Tuesday of each month. And this month, we are really excited to have from the San Diego County, the Climate Action Team, we're going to be hearing from Tyler Farmer, who is the county's planning manager. And he's going to be talking about updates to the county climate action plan. So Tyler, correct me if I'm wrong, you've got 14 years of experience working on sustainable products and related issues. And you are part of the planning division, part of the planning and development services. Okay, so with that, we're going to turn it over and we're going to mute everybody. And as always, if you have any questions, just scroll down to the bottom of your screen. There's a chat function, and just go ahead and type it in the chat function. And that way we don't interrupt Tyler as he's giving his presentation, but you don't have to remember what your question was, and we'll have it documented there. And then at the end, we'll take you off mute and we'll answer your questions, or have Tyler answer your questions.
That sounds great. And just add a little, context and, a little bit of expectations I have. It's roughly around a 7-minute presentation. So, kind of short and brief. But yeah, please, like Terry indicated, put your questions in the chat as we go. I'll bring those up at the end. But then, yeah, totally willing to take live questions and have kind of a more of an open forum discussion as well. But yeah, just coloring in, my background a little bit. Terry did a good job of capturing it. But yes, I'm a planning manager within the Sustainability Planning Division of Planning and Development Services. But really what that means is I'm a planning manager with the team that's involved with the Climate Action Plan, which includes the implementation of our 2018 Climate Action Plan, but also the Climate Action Plan update process that we're going through. And that's going to be the subject of the presentation today. But we also cover more broadly some, clean mobility efforts, implementing actions that come from our electric vehicle roadmap. So we also cover that within my team as well. So I'm going to go and try and share my presentation now. So let me try and get that working.
Yeah, you should be ready to go.
Okay, great. So let me try and pull it up. I'll share this screen. And then can people see my full screen presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. And is it the one taking up the whole screen, or is it the one with the notes?
It's the right one.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, well, thank you for having the opportunity to be in front of the Climate Action Team here for Fallbrook. It sounds like not only are you guys very active with efforts related to climate action planning and associated issues, but it seems like you guys have a robust book club as well. So been excited to be in front of you guys. But yes, more importantly, appreciate the opportunity to present the Climate Action Plan update. This project is a countywide effort, and we recognize groups like yours as major stakeholders in this effort. And with this presentation, we're hoping just to be able to convey an overview of the project, and we anticipate that this may just be maybe a first of many times we'll meet on this topic. And as we get further into the development of the project, we have more specifics, we are happy to come back and talk with you and receive your input. But for today, we appreciate any preliminary comments you may have. And then again, thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. So Tom, can you confirm that the slides are advancing? I just want to make sure the presentation. Okay, great, thank you. So this slide captures the concept of, why do we need a climate action plan update? In 2011, the county updated its general plan for the first time in over 30 years. This resulted in a general plan that shifted density westward towards the incorporated cities and existing infrastructure and reduced the map density by about 40%. And it also established a village-focused density. And this strategy really emphasized the importance of creating, complete communities and planning for development that would reduce travel distances to employment and other services. The 2011 general plan also recognized climate change as a serious issue, include a series of goals and policies that were focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It also wanted to meet the goals that were consistent with the state's Global Warming Solutions Act, or also known as AB 32. And notably, the environmental document prepared for the general plan required that a climate action plan be prepared to mitigate the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the build out of the general plan. So subsequent to the adoption of the general plan, the county prepared a climate action plan in 2012. However, this was overturned by the courts based on the environmental document that supported it. So in 2018, the county adopted its second climate action plan. We've been going forward and implementing that for the last 3 years. But unfortunately, this too was overturned by the environmental document. And as a result, the county is embarking on our third iteration of the climate action plan. I do want to note that we've received some very direct board direction this year related to our climate action plan, and this was provided on January 13th and January 27th, specifically related to this project. And you can see a summary of this direction on this slide. The board is really looking for a document or a climate action plan that is legally enforceable, does not purchase carbon offsets to meet greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. We'll talk a little bit more about what those mean later. They want updated modeling and data to be driving the project. And they want this project to really emphasize on environmental justice and equity. And they want it to be shaped through a community input process. They want it to exceed Senate Bill 32 greenhouse gas emission reductions. And Senate Bill 32 is really focused on the 2030 timeline. And they also wanted us to meet a net zero carbon emissions by 2035 to 2045. And then finally, the board also established the Environmental Advisory Committee, which is a subcommittee for the Board of Supervisors. And this committee will receive input and provide direction on this project. So there are several key steps to climate action planning that I'd like to highlight for you and will be major milestones and efforts for this project. So first, we'll complete a greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the unincorporated community emissions and from county operations. So this really means that we're going to look at county facilities and the community as a whole to determine where our greenhouse gas emissions are coming from. Next, we'll use this inventory to set our greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, and those will be consistent with state requirements and board direction. We will then engage the community to develop climate action plan measures, which will reduce greenhouse gases and provide other co-benefits like water and air quality improvements, new clean energy and manufacturing jobs, and increased access to clean transportation, just to name a few. The climate action plan update will also include the development of an environmental document, which will evaluate the environmental impacts associated with the project itself. And then ultimately, we'll bring both documents, the climate action plan and its environmental document, to the Board of Supervisors for approval. And since the document was previously subject to litigation, there are several mandates that must be fulfilled for us to satisfy the courts. The climate action plan update will have an environmental document, which will tier from the general plan environmental document. We want to take the opportunity to fix several aspects of the old CAP that had an environmental document that was inconsistent with how the courts viewed. And some of the fixes that we're going to look to address are revising and or deleting a mitigation measure that allowed for the use of carbon offsets to reduce greenhouse gas impacts. And for anyone wondering what carbon offsets are credits that can be purchased from a project that reduces greenhouse gas emissions elsewhere, such as regionally, within California, the United States, or even internationally, based on the assumption that certain conditions and standards are met. Additionally, the court found fault with the analysis of the greenhouse gas impacts for the in-process general plan amendments and said that the climate action plan did not sufficiently evaluate those impacts that related to air quality, emissions, and others. So we'll be looking to revise that through our current effort. And the court directed that the environmental document should analyze and identify at least one smart growth alternative, which looks to reduce vehicle miles traveled associated with greenhouse gas impacts. And finally, the environmental document should evaluate consistency of the climate action plan with SANDAG's effort, specifically their regional plan, which is their plan to reduce greenhouse gases in the region. This slide here shows our project timeline. We show each of the major milestones on top, milestone years, and then we show each of the major project elements on the side. This includes our climate action plan itself, which is in, obviously a draft form. Then the next line is the environmental document. And then the final combines both the climate action plan and environmental document with its final public hearing. Currently, we are in the inventory preparation phase, and we're doing our initial community outreach to provide a project overview to interested stakeholders, similar to what we're doing in this meeting. And these initial meetings really, help us kind of frame what the major components are and, allude to the next steps and really get, initial impact from community members and community groups. But as we move forward, we'll continue to engage the community and then look to develop our emission projections and develop measures to reduce those emissions. Our environmental document has a series of important steps that support the project. We completed our notice of preparation and our first scoping meeting for this project in January, which actually went over a little bit into February. And then all of this helps build to a draft document, public review, and preparation for a board hearing, which is scheduled currently for the end of 2022. But we do want to emphasize that we will be engaging the public throughout the life of the project and appreciate any feedback you have at any step in this process. So, I do want to say the county is committed to robust engagement for this climate action plan update so that we can ensure this plan not only achieves our greenhouse gas emission reductions, but also provides those co-benefits that we talked about earlier, cleaner air and water, jobs, access to transportation, and others. We'll be hosting multiple public workshops over the next 9 months. We did have a dedicated climate action plan update workshop earlier in April. And for this, we talked about just the major components of the project. And we'll also have a series of upcoming workshops to talk about very specific elements of the project. Our next planned workshop will be focused on equity and how equity will be part of the conversation for the climate action plan update. And then after that, we'll have another workshop related to climate action plan measures themselves. And we're also available not only through these public workshops, but for individual presentations similar to this to any interested stakeholder groups. And this slide includes my email. So if you'd like to, discuss this project further, or if you have ideas or thoughts that come to you, after the close of this meeting, please feel free to email me and provide that input. We also have our project website listed here. And if you go to the website, you can subscribe to our updates on the climate action plan. And, really what you'll get from that subscription is noticing of our public workshops. We also issue a monthly newsletter to talk about more specific elements that we're working on. So really appreciate the time here and kind of welcome any kind of questions that you guys might have. Let me go ahead and stop sharing this screen. It'll be a little bit easier to see and interact with everybody. So I see that we have one written comment. I'll address this one first and then happy to answer any other questions. So from Cynthia Young, we have the question, who is providing expert environmental information for the project? So information for this project is being gathered in multiple different ways. We do have a consulting team that is supporting the project. We have a dedicated consulting team with many other, sub-consultants. This firm has, expertise in climate action planning, and then they have subs that, focus on transportation or economic analysis or other elements that are really important to this project. There is a dedicated firm for doing equitable outreach to underserved communities and many others. So we have this dedicated consulting team that helps provide advice. Staff members also do broad research on best management practices of other climate action plans and other efforts that help shape the process. But one of our most valuable expert advice is the information we receive from our community members. Us, through our planning efforts, can only know so much from our research, but community members throughout the unincorporated area are experts in their local communities. And the feedback we get from engagement with these communities is critical for us understanding how our climate action plan could have impact on those communities, or the thoughts that these community members might have that could help create a climate action plan that is more useful and impactful for the region as well. So I hope that addressed your question. So our expert advice comes from a multiple different avenues and opportunities. I see a question here from Mark. How many people are working on the plan? That's a great question. We have a broad consulting team that includes many, many different members. I don't have the exact number of that consulting team on hand now, but it is a prime consultant and many sub-consultants. Within the County of San Diego, our team, the sustainability team that is focused specifically on this effort, includes myself and then 5 staff members below me working on various different elements. We then have our chief, who is our lead for our division. She is actively involved in this project. And we'll have another staff member soon that we're looking to retain now, which is more of a program manager. So those are the local team members, but this is also an interdepartmental, interdivisional effort. And we have working groups throughout the county that weigh in on different aspects of the project at different milestones. So while we only have we have a very focused, dedicated team, there are many members throughout the County of San Diego staff that are involved in this process. These are great questions, and I appreciate these already. Okay, let me just scroll up here. So Harriet, how are you thinking to address private issues like people driving gas guzzlers? A lot of problems seem like they need a lot of money thrown at them to affect change. So these are great questions. I'll try and take these apart. So, there are some issues by, and I think this is capturing what your intent of the question is, Harriet. There are individual choices that impact and result in greenhouse gas emissions, like the choice of the vehicle you drive. So for instance, what we look to do within that environment is provide reasons and opportunities to look at new options. So for instance, if we want to get somebody from a standard internal combustion engine, which is your standard, gas using car, into an electric vehicle, we will look to make the infrastructure to support electric vehicles broad and available, so the choice to select an electric vehicle is easier to make. We also look for opportunities to identify funding, which might be able to reduce that cost of owning an electric vehicle. So those who are interested in a vehicle have the opportunity and resources to make decisions to get within that vehicle. So while we can't change every specific individual, we can create programs, incentives, requirements, and other items to help make those types of changes easier for each individual. So that's kind of one question. And then on the second part of your question, Harriet, is a lot of problems seem like they need a lot of money thrown at them to change. And that, I think, that's, a wise response. Some items are easy and there's some low-hanging fruit, but within California, we have a lot of regulations that come down from the state that address, those easier to obtain greenhouse gas emission reductions. And sometimes the conversations do get harder about how we further reduce them. So through our efforts, we'll be looking at cost effectiveness of each of our decisions. We'll be looking from feedback from people on opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that we haven't thought of before. But we will try to find ways to be effective with public dollars on achieving these reductions while still meeting the goals that the public at large has established for us through the Board of Supervisors. All right, so I have a question now from Bill. How is transportation evaluated? So transportation is the largest sector of greenhouse gas emissions that is identified through our inventory. And these are using our 2018 Climate Action Plan numbers. That established that around, I think it's like 43 or 45% of all the emissions in the county come from the transportation sector. It is likely that we'll find out when we're updating our inventory for this Climate Action Plan update that the transportation sector is still the largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. So our analysis establishes this as an inventory. And that's the beginning of our evaluation. And then, as I kind of showed in the presentation of the major components, our inventory just sets where we're at now. And then it looks at projections that go in the future. And then we try and set our goals to reduce those projections, and we use our measures to achieve those reductions. So transportation will be evaluated through measures that we can look at to reduce emissions from our transportation sector as well. Tim here has a question on, Tim says here, you mentioned workshops planned. Can you provide more information on them so that the public can get involved? Yes, we can. The best way to be noticed about the public workshops is to subscribe to our emails, which is a link you can find on our website. And if I get the opportunity later, I can give a direct link through the chat function on this for the group. Subscribing to that list, you'll get direct emails that will provide registration links for our workshops. But the way that public can get involved in these workshops, we're trying to make it a little bit more interactive this year, or this plan development phase. So the workshop we had in April, throughout the presentation, we had different stops for polling questions. And so we made it easy for people to just select some answers and get some instant feedback for us. And then throughout the process, people could write in their questions through a Q&A function. And we provided written responses to those questions as the presentation went on. And then at the end of the meeting, we had more of an open discussion forum to address questions that people may have that we didn't address through the Q&A or other items. So that's a really great way for us to know what the public is feeling about for the different related topics we have. So I do, urge anybody interested, and I, get the feeling that a lot of people within this group could give us a lot of value to our process to, attend those workshops and provide feedback. Alternatively, you can always email us your thoughts and considerations, and we can capture those as well. So the workshops aren't the only way to be involved. They are just a very structured and accessible way that we try and provide that. We are also integrating language accessibility through our workshops as well. And in April, we had a live interpretive service that provided Spanish version of the presentation as well. So if you know people who are interested that have language barriers, we're trying to find ways to address those as well. You appreciate that question, Tim, and giving me the opportunity to give options on different ways to get involved. All right, Cynthia Young, is there expertise in the area of preparing CAPs and EIRs or in the environmental science behind it? So I believe, we definitely have expertise within our team. We had a competitive process to select the firms that are supporting us. They have strong backgrounds in climate action plan development and environmental impact reports. And all of the information that feeds into our climate action plan and environmental impact reports is science-based. So there'll be reference documents, standards, reports, and different information throughout each of that will lead to science and data-driven decisions that will then be complemented through the information we receive from public feedback as well. All right, Benjamin Talley here. My wife and I want to install solar. We own a recently constructed manufacturing home that, like most similarly built, does not have required truss strength. We have a large carport pad on which we'd like to erect a solar roof. An area is okay for about 5 kilowatts. There does not seem to be a pre-approved San Diego building plan for such. Can you help and add the plan if such a permanent plan is not already available? This is particularly true for rural properties like ours. So I think Benjamin's getting at this concept of having some pre-approved solar plans, which makes it easier to obtain a permit. And that's definitely something we can look into. The county's developed something similar for the accessory dwelling units on these pre-approved plans and really trying to streamline and make it easier for those to be looked into. So I can touch base with our building services and track this as an issue and see exactly what our permitting process is for PVs and ways that we could support this. I know we have some specific elements related to residential solar permitting. I don't have that information accessible to me at the moment, but we'll track this comment generally, Benjamin, and look for ways we can include, streamline, and make easier the installation of solar PV on residential properties through the Climate Action Plan update. All right, these are fabulous questions, by the way. I appreciate everyone's feedback here. Susan has a question. Is recycling being looked at so that we can minimize the impact on the environment? Yes, one of the major sectors we look at is solid waste. Through our 2018 Climate Action Plan, We had developed a lot of items specifically to looking at our waste management within the region. The county as a whole has a strategic plan to reduce waste, which has identified a 75% waste diversion rate as a goal for the county. And our climate action plan increased that diversion rate to 80% through its efforts. So we have a slew of programs and policies that we're implementing to better manage waste within the unincorporated county. Recently, our partners in Department of Public Works went to the board to make amendments to our solid waste ordinance, which will allow better collection of recyclable materials and specifically organics. So organics is one of our major problems within our landfills. Around 47% of the material going to our landfill are organic materials. So we're finding ways that make collection by our waste haulers easier for collection of organics. And then we're also looking at promoting composting as an alternative site for our organics as well. And that's an effort that we have going on in the moment, and it extends from our 2018 Climate Action Plan. For our Climate Action Plan update, we will also look to further promote this topic of solid waste management and other items. And we really appreciate any ideas or thoughts that you guys might have related to this and ways we can, improve our waste reduction numbers in the region. So Tom has a question here. Past county climate action plans were overturned due to objections raised by Sierra Club and the Cleveland National Forest. Are they giving input to the new plan? That's a great question, Tom. And yes, we have been engaging with the previous petitioners to the climate action plan for inclusion of their thoughts on this process. So we've engaged them early, and we will continue to engage them throughout the process. Great question. Appreciate bringing that forward and having the ability to talk about that. So Terry linked the .gov delivery. Yes, that looks like the correct one. So Terry linked a .gov delivery, which includes signing up for email updates. And then when you click in there, just make sure that you're getting the updates for planning development services. And I think there's a specific tag for sustainability or the climate action plan as well. So thank you very much, Terry, for including that link here. It's kind of hard for me to multitask, so that's helpful. All right, Cynthia has a question here. How will water use and the availability be handled in the plan? So generally, water use is addressed by the climate action plan. The major way that water use comes into play is when water gets pumped around for use by residents or commercial properties or other folks. You need energy to get that done. So the energy used to convey water from one location to the other results in greenhouse gas emissions. So we do look at ways to reduce water use, which allows us to reduce the energy for water conveyance. So through our previous efforts, we've looked at changes to our landscaping ordinance, changes to county water use, changes to our building codes that have higher water efficiency, whether it's toilets or waters or other elements within buildings and increasing the requirements there for water efficiency. So that is something that we're being looked at. And if you guys have thoughts on other elements we could look at in our climate action plan update, we're happy to do so. Susan has a question here. Any thoughts about having a separate unit to support solar or wind related permits? We waited almost 3 months to get an inspector for our ground solar installation. This will help speed up adoption and minimize frustration. So I think Susan's question here about another unit is just, getting more staff to support those that are trying to go through the permitting process. And I appreciate that feedback here, and we can look into that and pass this information on to our building services department as a suggestion for better customer service. So thank you for that feedback here. I would like to take a moment. Would I be able to get a collection of these comments from the chat so I can make sure that I'm capturing these? And Joy, I think you're shaking your head yes. I think you're muted, Joy.
Yes, you will get a copy of the chat text.
Okay, appreciate it, Bill. Thanks for confirming. It's great feedback and really interesting thoughts here, and I just want to make sure that I take away these and give them to the correct people to address as appropriate. So that is very helpful.
Bill, are you going to get that off the recording? Is that how you're going to do it?
No, it's the chat actually is saved as a text file. So everything that's going in there will be saved as a text file.
Okay.
Okay, great.
But we are recording the video.
All right, thank you for that, those details there, and helps me with the logistics moving forward. So much appreciated. All right, Bill has a question here. What about mandating curbside green recycle bins? This topic is one that's being discussed regionally at the moment. There is Senate Bill 1383, which is a Senate bill from the state of California that is related to, it's titled short-term climate pollutants. But really what that means is greenhouse gas emissions like methane, which come from our landfill, and ways that we can make our landfills have less methane emissions. And one of those major methane emissions comes from the breakdown of organic materials in our landfills. And so Bill's question kind of gets at the same thoughts that the Senate bill is trying to get at, which is mandating pickup at locations, which gives people the opportunity to put their organics in there rather than putting them in a waste bin and it getting sent to the landfill. This gets to some of the components I was talking about earlier. Our folks with the Department of Public Works are working directly on updating the types of bins that will be available for our residential and commercial locations, and working with the waste haulers to change the way that those items are picked up and where those materials are brought to. So that's in front of the board at the moment. They had their first hearing on it earlier, and they'll have a second hearing on it soon. And again, we're looking at facilitating composting and the collection of offsite materials as well to support that. So it is a great question. It is a question that addresses a big need at the moment and has a lot of conversation around it. So there are efforts that are being looked at related to that. And you'll probably have noticed other jurisdictions have started to adopt this. I think La Mesa has that organic element to their green bins where you can include it, and the city of San Diego is also looking at it. And the unincorporated county, with all the other jurisdictions, is looking to address that as well. Susan had a follow-up to the recycling topic. Other counties have organic versus inorganic, and for inorganic recycling versus waste that make recycling easier. I think that kind of gets at the topic we're just talking about. Making that type of recycling and processing of organics easier for residential, commercial, and other folks. And these are being set up, and everyone within the region is adopting plans to make it easier. And the unincorporated county is no different. We're looking actively at the moment on ways we can change this and have this being implemented within the unincorporated region. Harriet here has a question or a comment. The county has lots of rebates for efficient appliances and such. It would be great if they could include water recirculation pumps, so I wouldn't waste a gallon or two getting warm water into my shower. Great comment, Harriet. Something we can definitely look at. Through the Climate Action Plan update, the types of things we look at are not only changing policies and creating programs, but also offering incentives that make people who want to do different types of activities or want to adopt different types of practices, make it easier for them. So this is something we can definitely pass on to the team for evaluation of the Climate Action Plan update, and could support a Climate Action Plan reduction measure, greenhouse gas emission reduction measure. Joy here has a question. How is the regional plan going to work with the Climate Action Plan? Will it just be referenced in the Climate Action Plan? So there's a couple of items regionally. Sandag has its regional plan, which is associated with things that Sandag is involved with, transportation planning and others. And we'll make sure our plan is consistent with them. That regional plan already exists. Then there's also the regional decarbonization strategy, which is something the Board of Supervisors indicated earlier in January that they want to have developed for the region. So that plan is still under development, and the scope and outcomes that may come from it, we don't know what are included yet, but we'll be monitoring that process as it goes along in ways that our plan can interact with that plan to either support it or to support us will be looked at as it develops. So I don't know the specifics of it, but it is something we are monitoring, and it's something that we will try to remain in alignment with as it gets developed, so our plans can support each other and don't conflict with each other as they move forward. It's a great question, Joy. I think I've gotten all the questions in the chat so far. If I inadvertently skipped over someone's, please let me know, and please feel free to write it again. But these are really great technical, in-depth questions. You guys are obviously thinking, very in a more kind of advanced way than a lot of the feedback we get from our community groups. So I really appreciate this feedback, and happy to answer anything else that you guys might have. But I do want to take the opportunity to thank you for allowing me to be here tonight and do the presentation and to receive this feedback, and also take this feedback and bring it back to our team so we can include it in our tracking process and procedures, and then implement the questions at the right time for our planning process. Looks like we have another question from Terry. The city of Oceanside has started a commercial kitchen which uses recovered food from grocery stores and then creates food packages for the food insecure. Any coordination? I'll have to look with our folks with DPW, our Department of Public Works, to see if they've been coordinating with the city of Oceanside. I do know that they're working on ways to address edible food and finding ways to give it a new home rather than having edible food waste go to the landfill. And I know they're doing a lot of best management practice research and coordination. So it is likely they've talked with the city of Oceanside, but regardless, I will take this comment and pass it on to them to ensure that they're capturing efforts within the region. So great question, and thank you for bringing that up. Looks like we have another question from Harriet on the subject of rebates. I got a $350 rebate when I installed a heat pump hot water heater last year. It cost $350 more than the regular hot water heater and only uses 10% of the energy. The rebate really made a difference. Okay, great. Thank you for highlighting that area. I really appreciate it.
I have a question about some new green industries that have some potential. For instance, there's a fellow in Fallbrook who wants to start a shrimp farming, an inland shrimp farming business using storage tanks at large tanks. Mark, I see you smiling. You heard about this at the planning meeting. I talked to him. So he found that when he went to the county, there was nobody in the county had ever heard of such a thing before, even though it is being done or being talked about in other places and is being done, I think, in Canada. So is there any way to encourage, this is a sustainable industry. Is there any way that there can be any, I don't know, maybe an innovation office or something at the county to work with people who have some bright ideas to maybe help them through the permitting process, or even figuring out what kind of permits would be needed?
So we have my department, Planning and Development Services. I'm within the division that does some more of the long range planning, but we also have another division called Project Planning, which is associated with helping projects get through the permit process, helping them understand the zoning code and other requirements that apply to the permits that they may need. I would strongly suggest that the person get in touch with somebody from Project Planning. They can support them through that process and can let them know where the zoning code supports, or really maybe even conflict with what they're trying to do, and find different ways to understand and apply that. Our building services staff also has some good dedicated experts on different aspects and can be supportive of their efforts as well. So if a connection needs to be made where, they need to get to the right person to make sure they're getting the right support, we're happy to do that.
And here's another question along the same lines. We had a previous speaker from Ramona who has a ranch and a Leeds home, a zero net energy home, and his whole ranch uses sustainable farming methods. And he has talked to some of his suppliers. He had to go around the world to get the right suppliers to build the kind of house that would result in net zero energy. And he found that those suppliers would be willing to some of them would be willing to come to San Diego County to set up plants so that houses such as his, the Leeds type of a home, could be manufactured in almost a cookie cutter kind of way at a lot lower price than what he had to pay for his designed home. Where would somebody go to even talk to people? Would that also be a project planning question?
So is your question specific about how an industry person could talk with the county about getting their business set up here? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, or his idea was to have this green zone somewhere in the county where these parts for homes would be manufactured.
Okay.
Then those houses could be made available to people at lower cost, would be in effect lower income homes, not low income homes, but moderately priced homes that the average person could afford, that would be zero net energy.
So yeah, the establishment of a business, like a manufacturing location or some type of industrial facility to support that, they'd want to talk to our project planning folks to find out where the correct place to set that up. But the idea and concept of someone being out there to make energy efficiency homes more available is a great endeavor for somebody to be going through. We do have our codes and requirements that require a baseline level of energy efficiency, but everything people do to go above and beyond that is helpful to sustainability efforts at large.
Okay, I'll pass it on.
Thank you for having a verbal question here. It gave me the opportunity to take a break and relax my voice. So thank you. Yeah, anybody else have additional questions here?
This is Tom Stuber. And for whatever reason, I'm not versed enough to get my chat question on the everyone chat. But the general question we had was, when you discuss emissions, are you evaluating per capita emissions or gross emissions for a area or a planning opportunity?
So the emissions that we evaluate are not per capita, but just an absolute number. So we look at all the different elements that feed into the sectors that we evaluate and then look at a total number of emissions. And so that's the way that we're looking at. And then so when we reduce those emissions, that one emission reduced is comparable to that one emission that we have in the inventory. So it's a like for like number. It's not per capita. I mean, we could do the per capita by looking at the 500,000 or so residents that are in the unincorporated county. But we do look at absolute numbers for the calculations that we do.
Thank you.
I have another question. I was intrigued by Joy's question concerning the coordination between the general plan and the climate action plan. And I guess what I want to know is should there be variances requested to the general plan? And will the climate action plan have teeth in it that will prevent general plan from doing anything that's not in accord with the CAP?
So the climate action plan itself, is a mitigation measure for the general plan. So the general plan has all of our zoning for the county, which, maps out where things can be built. And then we look at the full build out of that plan for all of our emission sectors. And that's how we get our projections. And so our climate action plan addresses what's in the general plan. And then as general plan amendments come along, they need to find ways to support their own emission reductions. And so we are looking at the general plan as it's outlined today to map out our inventory and projections. And that's the scope of where our climate action planning covers. And then so those general plan amendments are something different, and there's something that needs to have its own evaluation. The 2018 climate action plan had some mitigation measures within it to support those. But the direction from the board that we received is looking at it differently than the 2018 climate action plan. And it's that item specific about the purchase of those carbon offset credits. That's something they don't want included anymore. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I was thinking, for example, of the proposals by developers to build in areas that are not designated for building right now in the general plan and go out in the middle of the wildlands. And there's some of the environmental impacts associated with that. And I think what I hear you saying is they, in recognition of that, they would have to come up with something to get them back in line with the CAP.
Correct. So those projects, those big developments, if it's a big development, but it matches what the general plan said for that area, then the general plan supports it. When it's different than the general plan, then they're going to have to do their own environmental analysis to show how they're reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. And so it's really just, looking at that specific effort by itself, or if it's part of the general plan, then it can be part of our process through the climate action plan. I'm going to check the chat, see if anyone entered. I don't think we have any new ones in the chat, but yeah, anybody else have any, verbal questions they want to voice here?
Well, can I just follow up on what Cynthia just asked? And so a developer comes in and wants to put in a certain number of units. Are we saying that somewhere else within the emissions reduction system, other than carbon credits, they are to find some means of offsetting or beating the emissions that would be created by that new development?
So that development by itself, if it's not consistent with the general plan, they'll be required to do their own environmental analysis, which will look at all of the 18 or so subject areas, its impact on the biological, its impact on waterways, its impact on tribal resources, and many other different topics. One of those topics is greenhouse gas emissions. So we'll have to do a technical analysis on how they're reducing those emissions.
And that applies even to those that are within the general plan approval status already?
So the ones that are included in the general plan will be part of our climate action plan analysis. So if you have an area that's zoned for 2 units, we are capturing those 2 units in our climate action planning process through our inventory and our projections.
Good. Any other questions for Tyler? We've had a lot of really good ones.
I have a new one in the chat.
Oh, okay. Joy had a question. What's going to happen on any proposed developments in the next 2 years before the climate action plan is updated? Great question. Anything that's outside of the general plan will have its own efforts. And then the ones that were within the general plan will have show consistency with the general plan. So, they'll still have the general plan to use. And then if they're outside the general plan, then they'll be on their own. And that will kind of be the process for the next 2 years. Thank you for the nice comments in the chat. Appreciate all the feedback we received here. And yeah, we'll capture all these written comments and we'll kind of plug them into the appropriate elements of our process. Or, there's some questions here that kind of go to some of other departments, and we'll pass that information along to those experts and feedback as well.
I have another question. Is the climate action plan the appropriate place, or is Sandag the appropriate place to bring up the issue of the road problem we have with Highway 76, which was built as a country road, and it's doesn't have sufficient right of way for buses to make bus stops on it. So from Fallbrook to Oceanside, you can't have a bus making normal bus stops every 2 blocks. They can only make the stop at the I-15 interchange, and then they have to go all the way to Oceanside, basically. And so that precludes us from having a normal bus system between Fallbrook and Oceanside with bus stops. So basically the road would have to be widened in a few places to be able to put bus stops there. Would that be something that could be incorporated into the climate action plan as an infrastructure upgrade, or would that be a Sandag question?
So it's definitely, feedback that we can receive and put into the climate action planning process, and identify that, hey, some of the transportation linkages for public transportation could be better. But the actual changes to make those happen would be something through Sandag, or maybe, whoever's in charge of that, road itself. And I don't know if that's Caltrans or somebody else, but Sandag would be your main contact for getting the right access to that public transportation. But it's something we could highlight through our climate action plan process as feedback received.
Okay, I'll put a note in the chat about it.
Okay, so with that, final question. Okay, and we have, I think have your email, right? So I guess if something comes up, if somebody thinks of it afterwards, was it tyler.farmer?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the chat right now.
Okay,
Just to reduce typos. Let me just actually do it in a way here so I don't do any typos. But yes, I'll add my email and then the climate action plan general email as well. So you can email me or the other account to get access to somebody regarding any of the questions you have.
great. Very good. Well, Tyler, as you can see, we have a community here that's very interested. So we look forward to continuing the discussions and providing feedback as we go forward. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for the feedback received. It is very, very helpful to us. We can't create a plan that's good for the community without community feedback. And these are great questions, really kind of next level questions. I can tell that you guys have been thinking about this topic, for a while. We're happy to come back here whenever you guys want. Do want to plug the workshops, one more time, really focus discussions on those. But if there's something that comes out from that workshop and you want a dedicated conversation here, we're happy to come back, either myself or somebody else.
Very good. Excellent. Well, thank you, Tyler. We appreciate it. And before we let everyone go, just a reminder, next month, May 25th, we're going to have a speaker named Dan Noble, a very good speaker. He's going to be talking about how we're transitioning from a linear economy where we waste a lot of stuff to how we can do a more circular, regenerative economy. So that'll be Tuesday, May 25th. So we'll see everyone then. And Tyler, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Okay, have a good night.